Thank you, Carter, and welcome Minister Zappone to the Leader's Questions realm. Her babysitter there with her, just in case the independents are taking charge of government at last.
Take all the responsibility.
It's interesting that Fine Gael ministers have gone missing on today. Minister, and indeed just to look at the debate we've finished about the need for fiscal stability in the context of wage agreements. Everybody agrees for that, but it's very difficult to take that lecture in the context of what's happening with the National Children's Hospital. There was no worry about fiscal stability, responsibility, or taking control during that particular debacle. And for the thousands of nurses who are again for the third day on a picket line, and for patients and for psychiatric nurses who are on overtime ban, it's very difficult to listen to those lectures in the context of the information that's continuing to come out right up to this minute in relation to the goings-on of the cost overrun of the National Children's Hospital. Within the last few minutes, Jennifer Bray has released information in the Irish Times outlining that there was a meeting of the Project Management Board of the Children's Hospital in September 2018, a meeting chaired by the Secretary-General of the Department of Health, where information was presented at that meeting suggesting a cost overrun of up to €400 million. Yet we are to believe that that information was not passed on to Minister Harris or passed on to Minister Donoghue, despite it being in the possession of the Secretary-General in September, ahead of this year's budget preparations, in a minuted meeting just released on the Irish Times. Minister, is that credible? Is it actually credible that information has been floating around at Secretary-General level and wasn't passed on? And what, to your mind, does it say about the relationships at the heart of government, relationships within the Department of Health? We have had, up until this, the Fine Gael defence, the backstop defence, absolute discipline. We need to hear a different view now, and this is your chance to actually put your stamp on this controversy. Are you comfortable as a government minister with the manner in which this is being handled? As Minister for Children, you all will agree that we all want to see this project delivered, but equally it cannot be delivered and it cannot continue to be delivered in the manner that it's being done at the moment, in the dripping of information out, in the undermining of collective cabinet responsibility, and all the time in the Department of Health, thousands of nurses on strike, GPs yesterday on strike, and more strikes to come. So, Minister, I'm asking you to bring some sense to this debate and bring some perspective to this debate. You're known as a straight talker, so let's start talking straight. Do you accept that this information wasn't shared at senior government level? When were you, as a Cabinet Minister, made aware of the cost overruns in the Department of Health? And can you, Minister, understand this morning the frustrations of the thousands of nurses who are picketing today to be lectured by Minister Harris about fiscal responsibility? He actually used the word that to meet the nurses' pay demands would cause the public finance spiral.
Time now, Deputy, please.
Minister Harris, who was asleep on the watch, lecturing people about fiscal responsibility. Can you understand frustration around that?
Minister.
Thank you, Deputy, and thank you for your good wishes on my willingness to take the opportunity to answer these questions today. First of all, in relation to your first point, the connection that people are making between the overrun in terms of the National Children's Hospital and what's going on today in terms of the nurses' strike. Yes, I understand that. I understand that connection is being made. I have spoken with many people who are doing that, including on the doorsteps in my own constituency, so I do understand, and including in speaking with a number of nurses and even retired nurses in that regard. Secondly, in relation to your question in terms of information that possibly was not passed on, is that credible? Do I believe what's been said? Yes, I believe what's been said. I believe what the ministers have said. I also will respond to your question, particularly in relation to being Minister for Children. Obviously, I've come to this especially with that role in mind. May I say, particularly the major set of questions that you're asking in terms of the credibility, the management, the political oversight and accountability of this. I think those are important questions. I think it is the job of this House and the opposition to hold ministers to account. And I think that that's what you and other colleagues in the chamber are doing. This is at least the third time this week that different members of the government are answering questions from the opposition on the extraordinary increase in the cost of the hospital, as well as questions in relation to the nurses' strike. Both the Minister for Health and the Minister for Finance, they've just been with you in relation to the strike. They've also answered questions in relation to committees. I know that there are outstanding questions and that we need to get to the bottom of them. I know that. And I know that you want answers. And Deputy, as an independent member of this government, I want answers as well. And it's for that reason that the PwC are being commissioned to review the escalation of the costs. It is being done at considerable expense. I understand that. And I have reservations in relation to the expense as well. Yes, I do. But I feel that that is necessary. Ministers have answered the questions that they can answer at this point. They've answered the questions that have been put to them in the committee. And I don't think that we're going to progress our understanding of how we ended up here by asking the same questions over and over again and getting the same answers. I expect that the questions will be answered by the PwC review, which will be completed at the end of March. And at this point, then, at that point, we will have further exchanges in this House. But I think it's our job as government and your job as opposition to get answers for our citizens. So yes, I agree with that. And I understand that they're angry. I talk to them too. And I hope that when we have that report that we will be wiser and that we will be able to apply the learnings in that regard.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Calleary.
New Minister, same response. Minister, we haven't got answers. That's why we keep asking the questions. You reply to the questions, you don't answer them. So PwC are getting €450,000, we think, might be higher, to give us the answers. But yet last night it was freely laid out at Fine Gael's parliamentary party meeting. It was all the HSE's fault. No, see here, very Basil faulty, don't mention the word, it's the HSE's fault. Again, Minister, if your Secretary-General of your department was made aware of a significant overspend and didn't inform you, what action would you take? Didn't inform you during the negotiations of a budget? During the negotiations of a budget, what action would you as Minister take? And secondly, before we get to March, before we get this famous PwC that's going to be the answer to all our dreams, what's going to happen, and I want you to outline the details, to projects around the country that are going to be postponed, delayed, using the government language, reprofiled, thank you, Deputy Cowan. What projects will be reprofiled, delayed around the country in order to pay for the government ineptitude around the Children's Hospital? And when will we be made aware of those projects, or do we have to wait for PwC for that?
Thank you, Deputy. Minister.
Thank you, Deputy. First of all, I don't accept the fact that I answered it in the same way others did. I tried to be straight with you as I tried to be straight with you as you requested, and I indicated that I think that the questions have been answered to the best of their ability by the ministers who it happened to in relation to these issues, and that we will have answers, further answers in relation to that report. In terms of the second set of questions I think that you're asking, that's particularly a lot on people's minds today, the Minister for Finance and Public Expenditure and Reform is going to bring proposals next week to government in relation to departmental reallocations in order to pay for the cost overruns that have been identified. How is that going to happen? First of all, as I understand it, there's going to be a process of an audit that will take place in terms of capital projects for 2019 that, apart from the National Children's Hospital issue, are already delayed, and so we need to see how much monies might be available in that regard. And secondly, then, if there probably will still be a deficit, then there needs to be identified a reprofiling of projects that would be delayed, but only for a matter of weeks. That's my understanding.
Deputy Pearce.